Now, Jacinta Price is the lady we'd love to see in that federal parliament ASAP. Alas, got to wait for an election. But she most likely will end up being there as the CLP candidate. But I wanted to get her take on a decision of the Victorian government. The Victorian government is going to tell, how's this? All the staff in Victorian schools, all the staff who work in dance schools, community sports teams and all the rest of it, even the ones who don't have Indigenous members as either students or clients or whatever the heck the term is, or teammates or kids playing sport, that they're going to have to do an appreciation of cultural sensitivity issues in any instance of racism are addressed with appropriate consequences. So put simply, the tick and flick, the kiss the ring, the brainwash. Jacinta, this is ridiculous, but that's my take. What's yours?
I have to agree wholeheartedly, Paul. Look, as someone who delivered cross-cultural education for over 20 years as part of my family business with my parents, we delivered it in a place, well, throughout the Northern Territory, particularly where there is a significant difference between traditional Aboriginal people who live here and the wider community, and the fact that in many, many workplaces, you have to understand those cultural differences in order to be able to effectively do your job, and in some cases, like in health, to be able to understand your patients. Now, this is ridiculous in that those of Indigenous heritage in places like Victoria, culturally are not distinguishable from their neighbours who are non-Indigenous or not of Indigenous heritage themselves. So it doesn't make sense that you have to try and somehow express the cultural differences when people are largely pretty much the same, all Australian, if you like, in other parts of the country. And what concerns me even more is the fact that what will happen is, and what has happened already in a lot of cases when it comes to those who teach cross-cultural training, is that facts aren't being taught. It becomes critical race theory. It becomes a task to further embed white guilt, if you like, in white Australians. And I think it's utterly ridiculous. It's going to be a waste of money. It'll further enhance the Indigenous industry, if you like, but where a lot of money will get wasted with not very many outcomes to show for that money that's being spent. And it's like we're expected to just simply respect and revere Indigenous Australians of all kinds, when we don't even know who these people are as individuals, their characters as individuals. I mean, I've had death threats from a Wurundjeri elder in Victoria in the past. I mean, are these the kind of people that are going to end up delivering cross-cultural training?
Well, also, it's this thing the thing that is really aggravating about this here is that, I'm from the school that believes that once you turn around and point out, hey, that kid, right? That kid, whatever that kid happens to be it that kid of a different skin colour, that kid in a wheelchair, that kid whatever, right? Instantly by pointing at the difference, right? That exacerbates the problem, right? If you turn around and just say, oh, okay, Malcolm, all right, cool, you stand over there, John, stand over there, Ahmed, stand over there, great, we're all playing footy, all right? You pass to him, pass to him, pass to him, or, you, Darlin, pass to her, all of that, right? That it's the activity that binds them together rather than finding a way to skew the activity to underline difference. Is that an unfair way of looking at it?
Oh, it's divisive, and it's identity politics, and it's again suggesting that it's infantilising Indigenous Australians, treating Indigenous Australians as though we're somehow different and we're special, and you've got to treat us differently. And it's the worst thing you could possibly do to any human being. I mean, my sons have been through this here and there, especially those who have spent some time in boarding school down south. And for them, they didn't want to be siphoned off into a special, Indigenous program or yarning circle. They just wanted to be with the other kids, treated like the other kids, without that sort of other stuff attached to who, who other people wanted to, how they wanted to view them and how they wanted to feel about them as, Indigenous kids. They just wanted to be recognised as Australian children. And we should not be divvying up our children. This shouldn't be happening in people's workplaces. Businesses should not be expected to fork out money where it's completely unnecessary. If people want to learn about Aboriginal history, Aboriginal culture, and all those sorts of things, the resources are there. People should be able to just go ahead and do those things off their own bat without it being spoon-fed or forced down their throat within their workplace, where there's no real need for it to take place within their workplace, particularly if, there aren't Indigenous people there who are culturally, vastly different from the person next to them. I'm just so done with this divisiveness and this really ignorant woke behaviour being imposed on everyday Australians.
Yeah, it's that thing where as the generations roll on, we all know that our attitudes to lots of different things change. The more you end up hanging out with people that speak differently, look differently, different sexualities, all the rest of it, where, the generations change, meld, it's cool. It's like, oh yeah, that's just my mate. And that's the way it should be, right? Like, I'm a little bit of a simple fellow, but I just believe don't be a dick should be sort of the opening passage of most of these things, and you don't need many pages after that. Good on you, Jacinta.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's always a pleasure.
She's a rock star. We love her. All right, Jacinta Price, get into that Parliament ASAP. Her versus that woke queen from Melbourne, Lydia Thorpe. How good's that going to be?